All right.
I'm pregnant.
Yay! So excited. So welcome back to this episode of NTNM Radio. I think this is the 4th episode that we've recorded with Kat so far, taking you guys through her IVF journey. She recently had her ultrasound, I believe it was yesterday. And this is where it's kind of the crucial telling point of whether or not the pregnancy was actually going to be, what's the term that you call it when at this point? Viable. Yeah, and so she had that appointment yesterday, and it was pretty exciting news.
I'm pregnant, yeah. So officially, so we went in yesterday. I was 6 weeks 1 day, and so much earlier than you would have an ultrasound normally if you had had a natural conception. But because we had the transfer, we knew exactly what day that occurred. We had the pregnancy test exactly 4 weeks, and then the heart starts beating in week 5. And so they like to go in week 6 because that's kind of, the earliest you can for sure visualize it. Make sure that there's a gestational sac, make sure there's a yolk sac, and make sure there's a heartbeat, because just like with any pregnancy, there's the possibility that you could have blighted ovum, which is where the gestational sac develops but no yolk develops, and that it might not be viable. So it's kind of 6 weeks in IVF is the tipping point where it turns from a biochemical pregnancy into a true, real thing. Yay. So that was good. I mean, I have been quite sick since about the middle of, I started getting sick in week 4, but I've been very sick since the middle of week 5. So I kind of I knew going into it that things were definitely continuing, but it was still really good to see the heartbeat and know that everything was developing normally. And so we could kind of okay, moving on.
That's so exciting. I'm so happy for you guys. So take us through a little bit of what you've been feeling these past couple of weeks. Not to spare us the details.
Oh yeah, it's not been fun. I'm someone who, I always find it so interesting when you hear these stories of people who are 7 weeks or 14 weeks or 7 months pregnant and had no idea, because I'm symptomatic from the get-go. And really early on, it was difficult to tell what was the supplemental progesterone that I was taking for the IVF that was causing side effects, and what was actually my beta HCG levels rising. And so about 4 weeks in, I started getting nauseous. I was having lots of gas and gurgling and reflux. I was super tired, napping almost daily, going to the bathroom more, definitely cranky, super hot, joints were achy, kind of all of those things.
Probably doesn't help. It's 45 degrees there right now too.
Yeah, no, the last couple of days have not been kind. Definitely not. But then, so that was kind of from week 4 on, I was having all of that stuff. And then we had this really lovely big family Christmas dinner last weekend. And that was the day that my heightened sense of smell kicked in, full bore. And it was all the foods and all the people and their smells.
Mm-hmm.
I was just not in a good state. And then essentially a couple of days after that, I went from being nauseated intermittently and kind of moderately to being extremely nauseous and tired 24/7. So I'm not actually I'm reflux vomiting into my mouth a fair bit, but I'm not having a lot of actual puking.
Mm-hmm.
It's more just super nauseous all day long. And I'm not one of these people that is nauseated and doesn't want to eat. I'm still starving.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel I'm it's kind of that hangover feeling where it's okay, well, I just have to find the right thing to eat and it's going to make me feel better.
Oh, that's very relatable. Yeah, I can understand that. So what happened?
So you're so I mean, right from the get-go, I've been drinking pickle juice out of the jar and eating a boatload of pickles, which I think might have been related to the progesterone because it causes some increased diuresis. And so I think with the sodium and stuff, it was just that natural desire to replenish. So it started with that, but now it is all about carbs, carbs, and broth. Soup and carbs is all I want. So I was kind of eating like English muffins with eggs on them. That was pretty good. But like even in the last couple of days, I've started moving away from any protein into just like noodles. Like I bought fresh ramen noodles and then chicken stock, and have been trying to like make myself faux ramen and just like weird stuff, pea soup, things like that. So I was talking to Ben today because I was like, I had zero protein yesterday. Like I just could not. And so I was like, I think I need your help to make me a little bit more accountable for that. I don't think that, eating red meat or anything is going to be a go at this point, but like I can do shakes, but I need to do them earlier in the day. I can't do them later in the day. So I'm like, you need to encourage me to like, even if I'm having 3 or 4 scoops of protein a day, I'd rather do that than have zero protein intake at all.
Right, exactly. And are you going to be trying to follow like a specific macronutrient profile? Is there specific changes that you think you should be making at this point?
Yeah, so I am, like not with any sort of success.
It's like a do as I say, not as I do type situation as a nutrition coach.
Yeah, it's like, look, there's all these like great goals and lofty goals, and I'm tracking, like I'm putting my stuff in the beginning of the day, and then I just stop, and I'm just so wildly off. But it's like every day I try to at least start fresh and make an effort, and it's kind of like with exercise, where I always say to clients, especially when they're first pregnant, like a particular movement might feel terrible one day, but it might be totally fine the next. Mm-hmm. So until you're further on in your pregnancy and you're actually physically limited in what you can do, try reintegrating those movements every once in a while. And if they don't feel good, then cool, cut them out. But like burpees and stuff like that, I'm totally off right now just because the change of direction kills me. Right. But I'll probably reintegrate those if my nausea starts to subside, right? It's the same thing with food. I think it's like continually try and reintegrate things, because some days might be totally okay to have the vegetables or to have the chicken, and you're going to be better off for it. Exactly. So that's like, I always start my day with the intention to like track and the intention to try and get my protein and veggies up, and it just is a disaster. So I think like it's important to note that I was kind of coming off a cut for nationals when we started the IVF process. And so I talked with one of our other coaches about this, and we looked at my profile and thought, okay, what do we need to do? And we'd started pushing me up gradually, particularly by way of carbs. Because when you are building a baby, you need more carbs. Your insulin levels change, your metabolic processes change. And so kind of the bottom end is like 175 grams of carbs a day that everyone's going to need, bare minimum. Which is significantly more than I've really ever consumed. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of built me up to that. And so my current profile is kind of sitting at about like 1950 calories, with the intention to be shifting that up. 175 grams of carbs, 155 protein, and 70 fat or something like that. Right. Like I said, I'm probably eating like 300 grams of carbs a day.
Right. So, and like 60 grams of protein.
Oh yeah, I swear I'm gonna be better today. Like we're gonna get there, but yeah.
I have a question, and I don't know if you're gonna be able to answer it, but like, what is it that causes these symptoms when you're pregnant? And I'm assuming that they typically subside at some point during the pregnancy. And so what's the change there? Like, I don't understand the biology behind that.
So you've got some pretty significant hormonal fluctuation going on, right? Yeah. Right off the get-go, HCG levels, which are absent when you're not pregnant, start skyrocketing. And those will double every kind of 48 to 72 hours. And those cause a ton of the symptoms. Those are also what causes your positive on your pregnancy tests, right? So as those are, and those will continue to double every 48 to 72 hours into the beginning of the second trimester, which is why typically women start to see There's, when they'll kind of peak and level out and start to drop a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So women typically see a cessation or a subsiding of symptoms early in that second trimester. At the same time, your progesterone is also increasing, and that's causing a lot of the other symptoms as well.
Okay.
You've got more relaxin, which is going to potentially cause some pain in your joints. It's what's going to cause your esophagus to relax and those sphincters to relax, which is going to cause heartburn, things like that. Which is why it's like I was saying, I have tons of reflux, and that even though there's nothing actually physically taking up space, everything's more relaxed, and so you've kind of got stomach acid reversing back up. Right. There's a lot of changes too, structurally, that are going on, right? Like your uterus is expanding in size, and so that's compressing your bladder and making, a lot of people have a lot of urinary frequency. Cramping, a lot of uterine cramping, and then just different types of cramping too, which is related to like all of your blood vessels are dilating and everything's competing for space.
Right.
And so you can start to see a lot of that.
So different people kind of respond differently to those hormonal fluctuations. Is that similar to what women would experience in PMS? Like how some people experience heightened symptoms, whereas some don't really experience any symptoms at all? It doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything different going on in terms of the hormones and the fluctuations there, but it's just the way that they respond to it.
100%. And look, there can be a large variance in regards to the hormones as well, right? When we're talking about HCG levels, I'm just trying to pull up the reference ranges here quickly. There's a huge range, and some women, like you'll get on these blogs, so in forums, which is the worst thing you can ever do. So really try and stay of those. But you'll get some women who have really low beta HCG levels, and they're climbing quite slowly because they are so low, but they continue to double. And so if your HCG levels are lower, you might not have as many symptoms, right? Just to give you an example, like if you're not pregnant, your HCG levels are going to be less than 3. In your 6th week, they can be anywhere from 158 to 31,800.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? So someone with like a level of like 158 is going to be very different to someone who's like pushing 30, right? And 2, if you're carrying twins, those HCG levels will skyrocket. So that's why women with twins are often so much more symptomatic as well.
Gotcha.
Once those start to stabilize, if you are carrying a boy, and once their testosterone starts to kick in, because their testosterone levels, the fetus's testosterone levels are about equivalent to an adult male's during gestation, and then they drop off once you get closer to birth, those can cause symptoms in the mother as well.
Okay.
So it's just lots of fun.
And is there, do you think there's a correlation between being really symptomatic during PMS often and then being more symptomatic during your pregnancy? Like, are you typically pretty symptomatic when it comes to?
I think that's like really subjective. I think that would be hard to say. What I would say is a lot of women who are quite symptomatic when they're menstruating is they're quite in tune to their body. So they're very hyper aware of any changes that are going on, which means that, yeah, in all likelihood, when you become pregnant, you're going to be very aware. I know for myself, I would say I know to the like hour when I ovulate sort of thing. So I'm quite symptomatic, and I'm very aware of what's going on in my body. So like I was saying to Ben, I just didn't expect this pregnancy to affect my weightlifting as early as it did, because things like even doing front squats where I'm bracing, I can feel changes in my core. Right. So whereas someone who maybe doesn't do those types of activities or just isn't quite as dialed and tuned in might not notice those symptoms as much.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. And how is training going right now other than the front squats and the burpees?
It's pretty good. I will say that like the best I'm probably ever going to feel in a day is right after I've trained. I never feel worse for training, so it's always beneficial to go in. I'm definitely like 6 weeks in already modifying things for a multitude of reasons. So, it's been 43, 44 degrees yesterday. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not working out today because our gym isn't air conditioned. It's completely open. I was like, because you're not supposed to, your core temperature is up about a full degree once you're pregnant. And so it's really important not to overheat yourself. It increases the mom's risk for stroke and all sorts of complications. And then also, of course, baby's risk. So that's a really hard one. Like, what's too hot? Everything feels hot when you're working in the middle of a WOD. Everything feels like you're overheating always.
Yeah, and if you add in the nausea that you're feeling too, you're gonna feel like you're 10 times hotter as well.
So it's like, it's not like, oh, you need to keep your heart rate at 90% or below. That's a very easy one to monitor, right? And to modify for. Don't get too hot is incredibly subjective. And so to me, it's like, okay, well, I won't work out when it's 44 degrees, but when it's 25, that's fine. And then some days it's like I might modify based on my symptoms. I might not run because my boobs hurt way too much to run, or my joints have really, like my knees in particular, have really been hurting throughout the whole progesterone period and onwards. Then I think we talked about this in a previous podcast and made the point that, well, I have put on about 4 kilos, which is almost a tenth of my body weight, he's like, so yeah, it might not just be hormones, it might be that you're actually carrying more weight too. So yeah, there's certain times like I'll modify for that, and then there's other times where again it's fairly hot and I'm modifying just to keep my heart rate down a little bit, not going to that full bore place of like lying on the ground staring up at the sky post workout, can't catch your breath, just trying to keep it under the red line a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's also important to like recognize that it is Saturday and I've worked out 3 times this week. I'm gonna do 4. I'm gonna make it in tomorrow. Partially that was because of the weather, partially that because I just had days where I didn't feel great. And so I think you just kind of have to take it as it comes, right? My goal is to get in and move 5 times a week, just do a group class, nothing crazy, nothing major, no extra training. And if I fall short of that some weeks, then I fall short.
Right. Cool. Well, it'll be exciting to kind of keep up with your journey. I don't really have a plan for after this podcast necessarily because we've made it to that 6-week mark, but I think it would be very interesting to continue to check in with you at least once a month and kind of see what symptoms you've been dealing with or how you're changing your nutrition, your training, all of that. I think it would be really interesting for myself and for other people who it might apply to a little bit more. And we're also excited to bring Claire on for an episode soon too. As we mentioned in a previous podcast, she is one of our newest team members. She's coming on board in the new year as a nutritionist. So we're going to be sitting down with her. She's a mom of 3, I believe. So she's been through it. She knows all the ins and outs. And she also has a lot of experience coaching both nutrition and training for a lot of perinatal clients. So it'll be really interesting to sit down with her as well.
Yeah, I think now the focus will kind of, shift away from this very, very specific experience to kind of a general pregnancy experience, and kind of use me as a little bit of a case study to outline some of the nutrition and training changes that come along, and what you kind of need to be thinking about and doing. So
yeah. And now that you're going to be sitting down soon we're going to be putting together a perinatal ebook, and so I think it'll be really interesting to be able to add in a little bit of like real life situations that you've been facing in that ebook as well. So it's not just necessarily theoretical, but it's also a little bit more practical too.
Absolutely, because it's all very well and good to say, okay, like here's your template, here's your profile for pregnancy, but it's like, no, like I'm eating split pea and ham soup 4 times today and that's all I'm eating, right? So there's like perfect rules and reality, and how do we bridge those two?
Yeah, so I think it'll be a really good experience for us as coaches as well as for the clients that we get to work with as well.
Definitely, I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, congratulations again. I'm so excited. I can't wait to come visit you. And yeah, send my congratulations to Ben as well. And we will look forward to catching up in the next episode.
All right, sounds good.
If anybody has any specific questions that pertain to pregnancy or anything that we've been talking about, it would be nice to get some insight into what you want to hear about more specifically, and we can tackle those questions in the upcoming episodes as best we can.
Beautiful.
All right.